Second wave feminism took place roughly between the famous 1968 Miss America pageant protest and the early 1980s. But long before the myth of bra burning on the Atlantic City boardwalk was born, African American women were awakening to the civil rights movement, which would eventually inspire second wave feminism. In 1944, Rosa Parks was busy with the NAACP, investigating and initiating community campaigns to protest the systematic rape of black women by white men in the Jim Crow South. That was 11 years before she would refuse to move to the back of that Montgomery, Alabama bus, not because she was tired, but because she was specially trained to start a revolution. When progressive college students began dedicating themselves to civil rights, Ella Baker helped the iconic Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee get on its feet in 1960. An activist since her own college days, Baker impressed upon the major civil rights organizations a model of participatory democracy, whose hallmark grassroots organizing, decentralized leadership, and consciousness raising, female Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee members would then take with them to the nascent second wave, along with the Ella Baker ethos that would become a motto of the movement: the personal is political. And Ella B also rocked some major shades. Even more major was 1964, with the passage of the Civil Rights Act and the testimony of Fannie Lou Hamer before the Democratic National Convention. In her historic speech, Hamer linked the importance of voting rights and reproductive rights for black women in her home state of Mississippi, where many, including herself, were forcibly sterilized, and the state legislature at that time was trying to legalize sterilization in exchange for welfare benefits. But this wasn't just an issue in Mississippi. Since the turn of the century, thousands of women of color across the United States underwent tubal ligation without prior consent. That same year, activist, lawyer, and all-around badass Pauli Murray coined the term Jane Crow, which encompassed the dual prejudice women of color faced and became the legal framework to challenge the not-so-equal Employment Opportunity Commission's 1965 determination that sex discrimination in the workplace is a-okay. And around that time, Murray had another great idea, thinking, what if there was an NAACP-type organization that advocated specifically for women? She mentioned this to Betty Friedan, and in 1966, the National Organization for Women was born. The raddest Pauli Murray fact of all? She's an Episcopal saint! As our often whitewashed memory of second wave feminism reiterates, few women of color felt at home among the largely white, middle-class National Organization for Women membership. So in the late 1960s and early 1970s, they began forming their own organizations, such as the Chicana Hijas, Cuauhtemoc, Asian Sisters, and the Third World Women's Alliance. Unlike many white-led feminist organizations at the time, multiculturalism and socioeconomic diversity were integral to their grassroots organizing, focusing on shared injustices and issues such as sterilization, infant mortality, housing and welfare rights, low-wage work, drug addiction, and negative portrayals in the media. Meanwhile, feminism was making inroads all the way to Washington. Lawyer turned activist Flo Kennedy and her signature cowboy hats positioned feminism as not just a thought exercise, but a bona fide political movement by establishing the Feminist Party in 1971. The following year, with its support, America's first black congresswoman, Shirley Chisholm, became America's first black presidential candidate on a major party ticket. Spicy old Flo was also known for dropping zingers in her day, including one of her most famous, "If men could get pregnant, abortion would be a sacrament." Hi-oh! And speaking of abortion, the 1973 Roe v. Wade Supreme Court decision raises important distinctions of how many black women interpreted reproductive freedom. While white feminists saw it as a chance to decentralize motherhood and domesticity in women's lives, women of color historically had to fight for the very right to bear and raise their own children, with family culturally functioning as welcome safe havens. For that reason, housing and rape crisis advocate since the 1970s, Loretta Ross, developed the more inclusive concept of reproductive justice. Black feminist thought, criticism, and writing also flourished during the 1970s and early 80s from the likes of Bell Hooks, Audre Lorde, Toni Morrison, Angela Davis, and so many others. And as second wave feminism came to a close, Alice Walker ushered womanism into our intersectional lexicon in 1983 to specifically describe feminists of color. Or as Walker put it, womanist is to feminist as purple is to lavender.